And with that, I think we will kick it off. Welcome, everyone. This is Dennis Stearns on behalf of Stearns Financial, and we have started these chats to engage you with interesting people who are figuring out interesting ways to deal with the interesting times that we are in. And so our first guest, many of you have heard or seen before, Dr. Gary Bradt has been involved with a number of different projects for us. He was originally the national spokesperson for Who Moved My Cheese, the best-selling book of 20 plus years ago that certainly was a major influencer for a lot of people in terms of how to deal with change. Gary is now considered a top expert in the world on change and talks to major groups all around the world and is now talking to them virtually all around the world on how to deal with some of the things right in front of us. So, Gary, I am going to turn it over to you and let you kick it off.
Thank you, Dennis. Good afternoon, everybody. On top of all my change stuff, what I've been doing for the last year is really diving into all of the research from positive psychology. I am a clinical psychologist. So some of what I'll be sharing with you today comes from that research. Some of it comes from my own experience. So how to stay positive during difficult times. I think we would all agree we're going through difficult times. Can I get my next slide, please? So it's hard to remain optimistic when you are all stressed out. And yet, optimism, for me, is the foundation of positivity. All right, Gary, what do you mean by optimistic? To me, it has three components. It's not Pollyanna. It's not like, oh, everything's going to be great. Don't worry. That would be silly. It's number one, optimists, true optimists, they make a realistic assessment of the present. They don't sugarcoat things. They don't exaggerate the negatives. They look at both and accept reality as it is. Once optimists have done that, they always maintain, no matter how bad it is, a belief that the future can be better. Doesn't mean it will be better, but it means there's a possibility. But that future for me is not going to get better for me just sitting back and going, well, I think I'll sit back here and wait and see what happens and maybe things will get better. No, I've got to take action. And sometimes that requires courage because sometimes it's easier to sit back and point fingers and blame and woe is me. So those are the three components we're talking about today. Realistic assessment of the present, I think we can all agree that's pretty rough. But I believe the future can be better, and I believe it can be for you. And I've been using some of these techniques I'm going to share with you today for myself, and they've been helping me. But you have the courage to act. Can we have the next slide, please, Bill? Focus on what you can control. The main thing that happens when something like this pandemic comes along, our initial reaction is often a sense of loss of control. We can't control the virus. We can't control the markets. We can't control all the pain and suffering we see out there. And now we can't even control going to our jobs and doing our normal routine. So that's very unsettling. So another kind of way to organize your thoughts is, hey, what can I take control of in my life? Because once you begin to get more of a sense of control, you begin to get a little bit more of a sense of ease. So in my right-hand column there, I've covered just 4 areas that we're going to cover quickly, and Dennis will ask me some questions. I'll be open to questions from you folks. First thing that you can control is you can avoid what I'm going to call negative triggers. What's a negative trigger? Well, for me, it's taking in too much of the news. It's the other day I went for a walk. I like to get up. That's one of the positive things I'm doing. Get up and take a nice long walk in the morning. And after I was listening to the news, and after about 20, 30 minutes, I noticed, oh man, I'm getting tired. Oh, I think I'll go back home. And I said, wait a minute, Gary, you have to be aware. I became aware that why are you listening to this thing? You got the gist of it. You need to stay on top of it, but I'm going to avoid that. So that's one of the negative triggers for me. I don't know what your negative triggers are, but you want to be aware of them. And an easy way to boost positivity is to remove negativity where you can. Now,
Yeah, Gary.
Yeah.
Gary, I was going to jump in here and say
Sure.
that first one is really interesting. I was watching the coronavirus town hall meeting last night on CNN,
Yes.
hosted by Anderson Cooper, and they had Bill Gates and a variety of other folks on.
Yeah.
And at the end, they basically said one of the things you need to do is not watch as much of CNN.
That's right. That's right. And hey, I enjoy that stuff. That's fun for me, but I've learned, okay, not now. But you have to have the awareness, because sometimes you'll be sitting there, just like when I was getting tired of my walk, I really wasn't aware of what was causing it. And mindfulness is something we're not going to talk about today. I'll give you a resource though that will come at the end, and that the Stearns folks will share with you. So mindfulness, and just keep that in the back of your mind. That's a wonderful tool to become more aware. So let's go to approach. Okay, you want to avoid negatives where you can, but mostly you want to approach things. And you want to approach things that you know will boost your happiness. So for example, on that walk, when I became aware of the negative triggers, I said, well, what do I want to do? I want to listen to music. So I turned on a little Bruce Springsteen. And I immediately, after like 10 seconds, noticed a lightness starting to come to my step. And I began to feel a little peppier. And I began to move my body, because that is something that boosts my happiness. When your happiness boosts, folks, you literally can see more. That's why it's so important for our friends at Stearns Financial to make sure they're staying happy, because all of us, when we get stressed out, our perspective becomes like this, and we can't see. Our mind's creativity goes away. But as we begin to relax and we boost our happiness, we can see a lot more. So I do this right now, and suddenly I see a beautiful blue sky out in my backyard and some beautiful pine trees. So that's the kind of thing that boosts happiness for me. Talking to my kids boosts happiness for me. So you probably know what boosts happiness for you, and you just need to consciously do it. By the way, I would put an approach here too, folks, is making sure you're coming up with a new routine, because that's the other thing that this kind of change has done. It's just wiped out all of our routines, commuting and everything else. And I'm sure some of you are figuring that out. I was talking to a client today. I do some executive coaching to one of my clients, executives down in Mexico. And she says, well, Gary, the first week was really tough. But the second week now, I'm going to get a little bit of a routine going with us and the kids. So avoid negatives, approach positives. And folks, here is the number one thing. This is not the number one thing just when you're going through tough change. This is the number one thing for life, that all the research shows the most important thing we can have in our life are strong social connections. That simply means relationships with other people, friends, family, even acquaintances. Like I said, when I opened up on that walk, I'd wave to my neighbors and I'd smile and that kind of thing. So one of the things I'm enjoying is, since I have a lot of time here at home, I am contacting people I haven't talked to in forever. I got one of my absolute dearest friends, and he moved to West Virginia, and we are here in North Carolina, and we haven't lost touch, but we text, once every couple of months. We got a Zoom call coming up. I got a Zoom call coming up with him. And my daughter, she FaceTimes us just about every night. So you want to make sure you're keeping up those social connections. We just got an invite from some of our neighbors that said, hey, would you and Peggy like to come over? We'll keep the 6 feet distance. Would you like to come over and visit in our garage tomorrow? Yes, is the answer, as long as we practice the safety. So make sure you're staying connected with those who are most important. Use this as an opportunity to connect with folks maybe you haven't connected with in a while. And finally, I'm going to label this last one compassion. There's some wonderful research on the power of compassion. As the Dalai Lama said, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And then Mark Twain said something like, hey, the best way to lift your spirits is to go out and lift somebody else's. Now, one thing I want to say on that is we got to practice self-compassion too. How many of us have that harsh negative voice in the back of our head that says some really pretty awful things to ourselves? So compassion is not just showing it towards others, but showing it towards yourself. I was telling Dennis the other day, a good example was, I was so proud of myself when the markets first started crashing. I have one account that I pretty much manage on my own. So I sold it all. I was like, yes. And then about, 5 days later, the market was down. I said, oh, I'm going to buy back in. And of course, I was way too early to buy back in. So I finally got out and I told Dennis my first reaction was to beat myself up. What's wrong with you? Yeah. I said, wait a minute, Gary. tough times. Everybody's doing the best they can, including you. You kind of cut your losses. It's okay. And then, of course, you want to reach out and show compassion to others. My wife came home today. One of the essential services here still is a homeless shelter where she volunteers. And she came home today radiating because she had spent the whole morning helping feed the homeless. And then she had this family she was going to go deliver food to. And she asked the homeless shelter, hey, do we have any extra food I could bring to them? I'm just going to bring them a sack lunch. And she thought maybe they'd give her a banana or two or some potato chips. You go, oh, wait a minute. They had a bunch of extra donations that day. They gave her 2 huge boxes, peanut butter, all this kind of stuff. Imagine how happy that family was. And imagine how happy my wife was. That's a cool thing about compassion. When you show it to others, you get to experience the happiness that comes with it as well. Bill, next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of structure on this, here's 3 questions that I basically ask myself every morning. You might come up with some other questions, but this is one of the ways that you can begin to build in that new routine. And I heard Deepak Chopra when Sanjay Gupta asked him this kind of question, and Deepak said, well, when I get up in the morning, I have these 4 intentions. Because it's easy to get up if you don't have intentions. You just kind of wander around, you turn on the news, and next thing you know, you're feeling kind of lost. So for me, example, when I get up in the morning, I say, okay, who do I want to be today? I want to be a person that helps people. I want to be a person who's there for other people. I want to be a person who loves my family. And I'm kind of setting my intentions for the day. For me, I interpret it as who I want to be. You might interpret it as what do I want to do? But have some kind of intention every day that you kind of gives you some focus and grounding for the day, gives you more sense of control. I believe it's very important to move your body. We have to do some kind of movement. If you're in a wheelchair, you can still, do this kind of stuff. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to walk, take those walks. If the YMCA where my wife works out, they're no longer having classes, but it's online. So whatever you can do to move your body, it's so, so important. And then again, going back to that social connection thing, one question I would encourage you to ask yourself every day, who will I connect with today? Maybe somebody I haven't connected with in a long time, or maybe just somebody I love so much I want to connect with them every day. So those are some of my thoughts. Those are some of my ideas. We could dive in a little bit deeper, but if we could go to the next slide, please, Bill. And final thing is questions. And Dennis, I know you probably have a few questions for me, and anybody else in there, you can use that chat feature, and those questions will get passed on to me and Dennis. So, Mr. Stearns,
Yes.
What do you have for me?
So I've got one question that has to do with one of our clients in Northern California, and their son came home to shelter in place with them from San Francisco, and then he didn't want to live by their quarantine rules. And so basically decided to leave the house and go back to the city, which was very distressing for mom and dad. Any suggestions on dealing with that?
I think the main thing, Dennis, is going to my very initial point. Control what you can, and you have to let go of the rest. I know I've got a 31-year-old son, and he'll drive me bonkers sometimes. And I've recognized he's an adult. He gets to make his own choices. He gets to make his own decisions. So all I can do is guide and give input. And then when I let that go, instead of feeling bonkers towards him, I feel love towards him. So I'm going to assume your son is old enough to be making his own decisions and going his own way. And it may be distressing you, but the best thing you can do is let go of that distress by recognizing we can't do anything about it. All we can do is love him, give him the best advice we can, and hope for the best. I know it's not as satisfying as being able to wave a magic wand and have him do exactly what you want, but hey, parents, we figured out a long time ago that's not going to happen anyhow. So those are my best thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. And have another interesting one. So this one is from someone who says that I'm an introvert. I don't have a significant other at this time. In normal times, I have difficulty having much of a social network, and right now it is really challenging. Suggestions?
Yeah. First off, if you haven't read the book Quiet, I highly recommend it. It's a book all about the strengths of introverts. In your case, you're going to have to get outside your comfort zone. If your comfort zone is probably staying in close, and even when you want to reach out to people, you're a little bit nervous about doing it. So think about people that you know. There's got to be people that you know, maybe people that you've never really reached out to before. These neighbors that are having us over, we don't know them particularly well. They're here on the street, and I don't usually like to go to social situations. I'm an introvert, but I'll go out of my comfort zone to spend a little bit of time with them. The other thing you can do is look for online communities. I don't know what your faith is, but of course, many churches are broadcasting. And if you have a resource like that, a church or a synagogue or wherever, a mosque, wherever you might go for your religious services, reach out to the folks there. I know they would want to help and say, hey, can you help me tune into some other networks of other people like me that are perhaps kind of feeling somewhat lonely, but we're not quite sure where to turn. Know that there's people out there who love you and they want to help you. And there's people out there who care deeply about you that you maybe haven't recognized in the past. So step outside that comfort zone, reach out, ask for help like you just did with me. And hopefully that helps you just a little bit.
Okay, good. Thank you.
By the way, let me add one thing.
Sure.
If you're a Stearns client, that's kind of what the Stearns people do. I reach out to them when I'm got some issues that are really kind of gnawing at me. So if you have somebody at Stearns, please reach out to them. I'm sure they would lend an ear if nothing else.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of that, lending an ear right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another one that says, I really want to see my dad, who's 75 years old, but he is convinced that the millennials are part of the problem right now, and doesn't want to. He'll talk to me on the phone. He doesn't want to see me in person. Suggestions?
Yes, this goes to the compassion component. I'd suggest that you kind of put yourself in your dad's shoes. He's coming from a place of fear, which is understandable. You would like to remove that fear. You would like to reassure him. And you probably can't do that. But what you can do is recognize he's afraid and say, well, what can I do to help reassure him? Not about, hey, you ought to let us come visit. But would it be a phone call and just saying, hey, Dad, how you doing? And not putting pressure on to visit. Would it be sending him flowers? Would it be sending him a book he might read? Whenever you see people that are in pain and it begins to impact you, our tendency is to focus on, oh man, this really hurts me. What am I going to do to help me? With compassion, you sort of flip it on your head and you go, man, Dad must be really afraid. And that's sad for me. I'd love to go see him, but what can I do to help, calm Dad down a little bit and let him feel a little bit more comfortable? Let me express love towards my dad. You might not be able to go see him, but you're totally free to love him all you want.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, now here's one that's kind of interesting. So I am fine, but my husband is not. My husband is an absolute.
Went out on me. What was the first part of the question?
So this is from a wife who says, I am fine.
Yeah.
Dealing with the crisis and sheltering fine, but my husband is not. He's a complete wreck. Other than providing him with some of my sleeping aids and antidepressants, what would you suggest?
If your husband is willing, one of the resources that I'm going to give you after this is over is a wonderful website called mindful.org, mindful.org. I mentioned that earlier. Mindfulness is not some sort of woo-woo thing. It's simply some wonderful techniques that we can use to begin to regain a sense of our control. And if your husband is feeling like a wreck, that means he feels like his mind is out of control and he's not quite sure what to do about it. If he doesn't want to go there, you go there and kind of poke around. But there's some wonderful things on like how to do beginning meditation. There's wonderful things on how to handle anxiety. There's lots of tools out there. I'm going to be giving you some other resources. There's a place called the Greater Good Science Center out there in Berkeley, California. You go to their website, they have wonderful tools and resources. So you might not be able to like wave that magic wand, but you can encourage your husband, hey, here's some tools, here's some resources. Why don't we look at this stuff together? Let's talk about it. Let's see what maybe we can implement in our lives. And you just start with little things and build from there.
Okay. Good. Bill, if we could go ahead and open up all the mics, and anybody who wants to ask a question, we can do some live chat here.
And by the way, for anybody, you're too introverted to speak up now or whatever, I've told Dennis I'm happy to have a conversation. You can email me, anybody that has questions they want to ask offline. Dennis has my email and he's perfectly free to share it. And I'd be happy to support you any way I can.
Well, that's very generous, Gary. We will include your email connection.
Mm-hmm.
And
the main thing, one of the things I want to share with all the questions we have so far, I know there's a lot more out there that are very similar. I want you to know you're not alone. That's part of compassion as well, particularly self-compassion. Is when you're feeling frustrated and angry, maybe because your kid won't listen to you or because your husband's a wreck and you feel anxious that you can't help him. Recognize that you're doing the best that you can. He's doing the best that he can. And there's other people, I can guarantee you, going through very, very similar things. Because oftentimes when we're overwhelmed, we feel as if, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, and we begin to do this again, and we feel alone, and we feel like we're doing something wrong, or we should be able to figure something out, and we don't realize, no, there's a lot of people going through this. And you know why it's hard? Because it's hard. But that doesn't mean we can't try to find ways, little tiny things, to make it better. Just if you can just take 10 seconds to look at the blue sky, instead of just glancing up, look out at that blue sky. I have a client of mine, another guy down in Mexico I talked to today, and he said, Gary, by the end of the workday, he works these long days. He said, I'm exhausted. But what I've learned to do is I get in my car and I take about a 30-minute drive and I look at the trees and I look at the scenery, all the greenery around me. And by the end of those 30 minutes, I got my energy back. So there's lots of techniques you can. The first one is be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, good. Apparently we've got some background noise. If we open up all the mics, could be an issue. Okay. So there is a feature in Zoom that you can raise your hand. And so if you would like to raise your hand to click on participants and just raise the hand that's on there, then we will know that you have a question.
Or a comment. Anybody wants to comment on what I've said? Or if some of you have, what have you been doing? What have some of you been doing that you find? Because again, we can learn from each other. We're in the common human condition. So some of you might want to just share, hey, here's what I'm doing to kind of keep my sanity. Here's what I'm doing to keep our social connections. I don't have all the answers. I'm sharing with you some ideas I have. Everybody has good ideas. I got some stuff from science, and I'm showing you where you can go get that. But we all have the resources, so please feel free to share those things too.
Yeah, and if you're on an iPad, by the way, on the far right where it says More, M-O-R-E, next to participants, there's also a place there to raise your hand. So we do have a question, I believe, from Bradt.
Yeah, hi, Dennis. Thanks, Gary, for the information. This is more kind of a leadership question around what you said towards the beginning, which is what we're trying to do running a company right now. What we're trying to do and balance as far as the message to the employee base is staying positive, but also staying authentic.
Right.
So that the recommendation is how to kind of balance the two and being positive, but also being authentic at the same time.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much. That's actually where I kind of, that model I shared with you at the beginning, it's actually a model of optimistic leadership. Because yes, in your job of running the company, you've got to assess the realities and what's actually going on. You can't overlook that sort of stuff. But it's very important, Brad, that you and other leaders in your company have to maintain your own hope that things, we don't know if they're going to get better, but there's a possibility can. And then what can we do? And have that courage to act. Now, communicating with your people, it's important. Number one, always tell them the truth. Tell them what you know. Tell them what you don't know. And by the way, you need to be touching your people a lot more than you normally would. You know, again, one of my clients today, she's a leader, and she has, she goes, I'm talking to my people all week long about all the business stuff virtually. But on Friday, I check in with them. Hey, how are you doing? What's going on with you? So you need to have that. Now, of course, Brad, your voice sounded like you are this. You want to be confident. You want to be calm. You want to be clear. And you want to be consistent in, again, touching base a lot with folks. Those are some of the things that leaders need to do, because we all look to leaders to sort of set the tone. And if the leader is practicing compassion, if the leader is practicing a realistic assessment of the future, if the leader is looking for ways that things can be better but doesn't promise they will be when they don't know it is, that gives people a sense of assurance. What people can't handle is if their leaders look stressed out or distracted, or they don't really have the time. And even worse, if the leader says something and the people are going, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like pie in the sky. People can handle the truth. Those are some of the fundamental ones. Brad, I coach leaders all day long, and just that's a little snippet. I'd be happy to talk with you offline and kind of dive into your situation and give you the best advice I can, because that's what I've been helping all my clients with here the last couple of weeks.
Very good. Thanks. Appreciate it, Gary.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Gary, we actually have a side question on that one, that it appears the news is about to become very bad for possibly the next month or two, for both the economy and for coronavirus. And so employees are going to be reading the newspapers and watching television, and they're going to get a drumbeat of the worst news of their life. So how do they believe what is the realistic assessment?
One, if you're a leader in that organization, I would share with them some of the kinds of things I'm sharing with you today and saying, folks, we can all freak out here. And one of the ways we'll freak out is if we sit there and we overindulge in the news and all this negative stuff. We want to stay on top of it. But let me encourage you to realize there's still a lot bigger world out there. Number two, realize, let's stay right here, right now. Our fear is designed to help us stay alive. And that's the problem. I didn't get into that because I don't really have time, but our brain has a natural negativity bias. We are drawn towards the negative. Why? And particularly in the news, it goes all the way back to the very time our brain formed, is to keep us alive. So that, like, if there's a snake over there and there's a flower over there, my brain's going to notice that snake a lot quicker and automatically react to it, because that could kill me. The flower is just nice. So I have to consciously trust my brain will watch for the danger, but then I have to consciously make sure I'm not overrunning that circuit. I'm not giving it so much input. It's like a red button in my brain. I got to say, I'll press that button and my brain will warn me when I need to. But encourage your people to be careful about overindulging in the news. Share with them what you're doing along those regards. And obviously they get to make their own choices. And encourage them to figure out what it is that they can do to boost their own happiness. Because that negative stuff is there. We got to learn to press the green button to offset the negativity. So those are just a few thoughts. And again, I'll be happy to speak with you afterwards if you'd like.
Okay, we have three interesting comments here. One, and we will put this up on our resources, that the CDC has a whole section on anxiety and dealing with anxiety.
Beautiful.
So we will include that as one of our links after the fact.
Good, thank you very much.
And then another one is that this particular group has a book club, and they're now meeting on Zoom, and they're going to be choosing books that I would presume would be more in a positive vein,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to pandemic books.
Yeah, I would hope so. You know, like Dennis, one of my clients, he's you know, him and his wife and 2 kids. One of the things they're doing is they all 4 of them read books, their own books, and then they come back and share with the family what they've learned. And I'm hearing from a lot of clients that, you know, there's all the horrible stuff here, but hey, one of the positives is I'm spending a lot more time with my family. I joke with my wife. I say, "Hey, honey, you want to go for another walk? You're kind of stuck, don't you? You have to kind of." She goes, "Oh, yeah, another walk with you? Can we bring the dog?" And this is a chance to spend more time with people, and but you have to, for all those folks who are freaking out, you can be the role model of how not to by implementing some of this stuff I've said. Going to that site of the CDC, the resources I will give you, and you can maybe help lead the horse to water, if you will.
Yeah, very good. So we have another comment about a retirement community that painted white dots on their cul-de-sac, and at 5 o'clock every day, all the neighbors on that circle come out and bring their chairs and drinks.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, on my street, we have a lot of people here. They're very social, and they kind of get into this thing with pink flamingos. So somebody said, "Hey, let's all put our pink flamingos out until this thing is over," because it drives the HOA nuts because you're not supposed to have stuff in your yard. And I read another guy said, kind of like that one, another guy said he put lights up on his tree, white lights, and he's going to keep them up there. But Dennis, your thing, that comment there, thank you so much for that. That's that social connection. Because social connection is not a good term. I mean, the social distancing, not a good term. We want physical distancing. We want social closeness. We want relationship closeness. So don't misinterpret social distancing as I got to stay away from everybody and I can't have any contact. Not true. They're telling us 6 feet. You stay your 6 feet away. And we got all this technology. So physical distance, but not social distance.
Yeah.
The way I'm using the term.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on, Gary. We are at our time. And again, thank you so much for sharing with our audience. And this will be recorded, has been recorded, and will be available later. If you all want to watch again whenever you're getting down, or send it to friends or children or others who maybe need a bit of a positive message. And these 4 o'clock Friday afternoons, we are going to have these every Friday for the next 2 months or until the crisis ends. So if you have any ideas on topics or speakers, please send them to us. We will have a career counselor on one of them who may be something that's not as much in your own situation, but maybe it's your child or grandchild who needs some career counseling right about now. So we'll have lots of pretty interesting topics.
Yeah,
So
my final word, Dennis, my mantra through this whole thing has been, we are all in this together, and together we're going to get through it.
Perfect. That's a perfect word to end on, Gary. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you, all of you.